All right, man, peace. So NBA super dad LaVar Ball is back at it again. This time he set his sights on Mr. Steve Kerr, the coach of the NBA champion Golden State Warriors. Steve Kerr, as we all know, is one of the super liberal coaches in the NBA, much like Greg Popovich. And consistent with his super liberal leanings, he likes to run his mouth about things that he does not know much about, or does not seem to know much about, because he just feels like he can. Because to be super liberal means that you know more than everyone else, and you can say whatever you want about any topic, but then you also feel like you have the right to tell everybody else what they shouldn't be talking about, which is what Steve Kerr decided to do or imply with Mr. LaVar Ball. Anyway, LaVar Ball decided he was going to strike back and call Steve Kerr the Milli Vanilli of NBA coaches. For those of you who are not familiar with Milli Vanilli, they were a musical act from the early 90s who were found to be lip-syncing at their live performances. So LaVar Ball is basically calling Steve Kerr a pantomime coach. He doesn't really do any coaching. He just does a lot of gesticulating. That's what LaVar Ball is saying. But anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Next up, LaVar Ball called out Luke Walton last month, and now he's going after Steve Kerr. LaVar is currently coaching his son.
Yo, is LaVar Ball coaching or is he breakdancing? Oh, man, like he was pop locking.
His sons in Lithuania, but he still had time to compare Kerr to the music group Milli Vanilli, who were famously caught lip-syncing nearly 30 years ago. Let's take a listen.
This is nothing new for me. I mean, coaching is not hard. I mean, anybody can be a coach. Hey, anybody can be a coach. You know what? I'm going to put a sign out there so you really go crazy. Look at Steve Kerr. He's the Milli Vanilli of coaching.
So he's not the coach?
No, he's the Milli Vanilli of coaching, which I mean is you can go stand in the same spot like Luke Walton did and win 20-something games when you got the right horses just running. Sometimes less coaching is the best coaching. But some of these guys like to act like they really coach some guys that know how to play. How do you coach KD, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson? You know how you coach them? You don't. Turn your back and let them do what they do. As soon as they win the championship, everybody says, oh, he's a great coach. That team was put together by Mark Jackson. And now he jump up and try and take all the credit. That's why I call him the Milli Vanilli of coaching.
Hey, LaVar unpacked a lot there. Let me say this. Number one, no, I don't agree with LaVar. Not just anyone can coach. To be a proficient head coach, not only do you have to have a strong command of the overall offensive and defensive scheme, you have to understand your personnel and how to maximize the potential of your personnel. In other words, you have to know and understand what each player does well and help them help the team by fitting them in to the proper role. That's what Steve Kerr was able to do with the Golden State Warriors. Now, is Steve Kerr a guy who can come onto a team with no talent and build them up from the ground floor up? Who knows? But what we do know is that he's a coach that is able to take a team from good to great. And that is rare. Because let's understand this very quickly. Coming into the 2014-2015 season, no one thought that the Golden State Warriors were going to be as good as they were that year, winning 67 games and the NBA championship in his first season. Prior to that, they were a 50-win level team with Mark Jackson, and give Mark Jackson all the credit in the world. He came onto a team that was winning about 30 to 35 games a year with a neophyte Steph Curry and what's the other brother's name? The brother they traded away, I believe, to Milwaukee. You know, the brother who takes all the bad shots. Monte Ellis. Mark Jackson came onto a team who basically just had Monte Ellis and Steph Curry and made them more than respectable, made them competitive. They made the NBA playoffs in 2013, were able to win in round one. 2014, fought a knockdown, drag out 7-game series with the Clippers. But Steve Kerr came in and took their offense to the next level. He brought them into modern basketball. So he deserves credit for that.
Shannon, are these comments from LaVar out of bounds?
Yep.
Let me also say this before Shannon opens up on his attack on LaVar Ball. Also, please understand that, as we know, I already made a series about this, LaVar Ball, to me, is clearly trying to denigrate Luke Walton because, in his view, he's tried to attack him, Lavar, through his son Lonzo by benching Lonzo and attempting to therefore sabotage Lonzo's career. Lavar has not gotten over that, and I believe that deep down Lonzo may have an issue with Luke Walton that he does not want to bring to the forefront because he does not want to make himself the center of attention. So Lavar's going to do it. And as we all know, Luke Walton has a connection to Steve Kerr. He was a former assistant coach of Steve Kerr's on the Golden State Warriors. So LeVar Ball is pretty much laying out the schematics of how he's going to attack the situation. Steve Kerr levied a shot at LeVar Ball because he's protecting Luke Walton. So LeVar Ball has decided that he's going to levy a shot at Steve Kerr and Luke Walton. That's pretty much how it's going.
Yes, absolutely. You can offer a critique of someone, Skip. You and I are professionals. It's our job to offer our opinion, and sometimes they're strong, sometimes they're harsh. But I do not go out of my way to be openly and blatantly disrespectful to anyone.
Oh, that's not true, brother. You're oftentimes openly and blatantly disrespectful, particularly to Des Bryant. Let's be very, very clear. You go out of your way to attack Des Bryant. And many times it seems almost borderline personal.
He's gone out of his way to be openly and blatantly disrespectful, not only to Steve Kerr, but also to Luke Walton. See,
well, he believes that Luke Walton has gone out of his way to be openly and blatantly disrespectful to his son. I mean, I'm sorry, you have a young team. Why are you sitting the number 2 pick in the draft in the fourth quarter in 3 straight games? That makes no sense. How is he going to get better from the bench? He has to play. I mean, you have Jordan Clarkson out there. We already know what Jordan Clarkson can do. Jordan Clarkson on a good team is a 6th man, 7th man. He's not your starting point guard. He's not the guy who should be finishing games for you. Luke Walton is who the NBA coaching fraternity wanted to be considered a wonderkind as a coach. But a lot of the luster has been taken off of him due to the poor performance by the LA Lakers. Everyone is scared to criticize Luke Walton. And this is a little bit of what Stephen A. Smith is talking about in regards to the long leash that Caucasian coaches get. That's why I state that if you want to counteract that, then form your own league. That's how that should go. You can have all black owners, all black GMs, all black coaches, and then you have to worry about whether or not the Caucasian leadership is giving you a fair shake.
See, what he had a problem with is because Steve Kerr, I was on this earlier, called him the Kardashian. And he got upset with that.
He did.
So let me get this straight. So I guess Red Auerbach is Milli Vanilli.
Yep.
Because on that 62-63 team, he had 9 Hall of Famers.
Well, one could make the case that Red Auerbach is Milli Vanilli. He didn't win shit until Bill Russell got there. And actually retired before that team broke up, and Bill Russell won another championship without him as player coach. So one could make the case that Red Auerbach, yes, that he was a Milli Vanilli coach. I wouldn't say that. But there's enough empirical data to try to advance that theory. Now, what Red Auerbach was great at was finding talent. By any means necessary, he could find talent. He drafted Larry Bird a year before he entered the draft. He also drafted Len Bias. Len Bias was supposed to be the player that took them from the mid-'80s into the late 90s, early 2000s. But, of course, he died from a drug overdose.
That's what he had on that team. So I guess Phil Jackson.
And Bill Russell was kind of the player coach. He became the ultimate
Yeah,
player coach.
but at that time, Bill was a full-time player.
Yeah.
He didn't become until, 69, I think 69, the 69 team when Russell, 68, 69, when he became a... If that's the case, so what? So what is Pat Riley?
Well, he talked about Pat Riley and Phil Jackson.
So what did Milli Vanilli
He said, Phil said, I'm going to sit back and look relaxed, call it the Zen Master. And he said Pat Riley had Magic Johnson let him do what he do.
So...
Hey, look, let's be for real. And this is something that Skip Bayless says a lot when in reference to LeVar Ball. What really irks people about LeVar is that he makes a lot of statements, and he puts forth a lot of sentiments that are logically based, but he says it in such an outlandish and braggadocious way that it bothers people. They kind of have to acknowledge that he's right without wanting to. And LeVar Ball's not the first person to say that Phil Jackson was the beneficiary of a multitude of talent. I don't think people understand what a great coach is. A great coach is someone who can maximize great talent. That's all a great coach is. A great coach is not going to take a bum-ass squad and lead them to a championship. That's never going to happen anywhere in life. What a great coach does is take great talent and get great results. So Lavar is really just trying to, via proxy, attack Luke Walton.
Doug Collins had that exact same roster that Phil Jackson won 6 championships with. Why couldn't Doug Collins do it?
Because Doug Collins was mentally unstable. Doug Collins used to break down and cry in the locker room after big wins and big losses. Michael Jordan was on record as stating that he could not tolerate Doug Collins' mental fragility anymore.
There are guys that coached Shaq and Kobe before Phil got them. Why couldn't they do it? If it was that easy, Harry the kicker.
Well, let's be for real, Shannon. Shaq got to the finals with Brian Hill as coach of the Orlando Magic. Once again, what a great coach does is maximize great talent. Brian Hill was not good enough to win a championship with Shaq, Penny, Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott. Like that team, they were squatted up. Horace Grant. They were supposed to beat the Houston Rockets that year, and they just could not deal with the pressure in a big spot. They were so good, they were precocious. They almost got there a year too soon. They really did get there a year too soon, and they did not have the coach to carry them over the hump. That's what a great coach does, is he makes you ready when you don't know that you're ready. And that's what Phil Jackson did with the Lakers in 2000. Because mentally, they had a couple of hurdles that they had to get over in their playoff run in 2000. And that's where Phil Jackson came into play.
LeVar Ball is the Milli Vanilli of dads. Like, he ain't doing nothing. Lonzo doing all the work.
Well, I don't understand how he could be the Milli Vanilli of dads when he's the one who's raised his boys up to be basketball players. It's very obvious that Shannon Sharpe is frustrated and upset with LeVar Ball because LeVar Ball made some very incendiary comments about him and other members of the FS1 sports analyst team like Chris Carter and Nick Wright while he was over there in Lithuania because they keep attacking him. And Shannon better be very careful because I know that he thinks that he's the champion of shit-talking. But LeVar Ball, if Shannon Sharpe is Muhammad Ali, LeVar Ball is Joe Frazier. You might win, but you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it if you get into it with him. Because LeVar Ball is the type that will, he'll get down and dirty with you if you want to talk shit with him. So Shannon better be very, very careful. And also understand that LeVar Ball has as big a social media following as the one that Shannon is trying to cultivate. With all the fake internet revolutionaries that Shannon is trying to cultivate online, even though he has a Caucasian fiance, Shannon Sharpe does.
He talking. He bumping his gums. He the Milli Vanilli and didn't even know it. Because guess what, Skip? If there was no Lonzo, LeVar Ball would be obsolete.
Yeah, he was about to say absolutely nothing. But how could he be absolutely nothing when he was a man who already owned his own business and already had his family in a nice neighborhood before Lonzo even played a game in the NBA? See, Shannon is another one of these guys, like I call him. You have different levels of the pro-black. Like you have the internet revolutionaries. You also have the television revolutionaries, right? AKA the boule. They talk a good game. But if they feel like they're affronted or they feel like they're being faced with a so-called black person who's operating outside of the conventions that have been set up by the Caucasian structure that the boule like to operate in, they get really thrown off balance. Like they don't know how to handle it because there's a certain structure, and I don't think a lot of people understand this. There's a certain hierarchy and structure in this societal architecture, where the boule are told, this is what you tell the masses at large, and you get reimbursed. Now, if there's someone who tries to be an affront to this structure, then you have to attack them. That's what LeVar Ball is. LeVar Ball is supposed to be instructing his sons to go to college, make the colleges a lot of money, then sign with the so-called sponsor like Nike or Adidas, things like that, and make sure that they make everyone else money, not themselves. Shannon Sharpe was the same person who got frustrated when LeVar started talking about forming his own league. Now, I wonder if it was a league that was being formed by a Caucasian man who promised to help the black youth. Would Shannon be as upset?
He would be a passing ball.
Nobody would pay.
Nobody would know. But maybe the YouTube viewership, maybe it dropped by a couple 100,000 or something, so he had to say something outlandish.
Maybe
that's what he wants to do. I believe you can say, you know what?
Similar to how you walk around with a stocking cap on, promoting the use of smoking Black and Milds and drinking Hennessy, right? Even though you're supposed to be a health nut. But you get on camera with Snoop Dogg smoking Black and Milds and acting like you smoking weed and drinking Hennessy so that you can get your social media following up, right, Shannon? Get out of here, brother.
You might not like someone, you might not like their coaching style, but to try to be openly and blatantly disrespectful, because here's the thing. If he knew anything about coaching, he realized the hardest thing to do, especially for an NBA coach, is to coach guys with mega egos, superstars. You got Klay Thompson is saying, hold on any other team at worst case scenario.
Well, that kind of nullifies your point because none of those guys have mega egos. That's what makes that team special, because none of them have mega egos. That's why I did a video on Klay Thompson, how he conquered the disease of me. If he was a different person, he would have left Golden State. I have a championship already. I'm ready to go. So that ego issue is, that's a straw man that you just created.
I'm the number 2 slot.
Yep.
Most nights I'm 3, on sometimes I'm the 4th guy. You got Steph and you got KD. How do you manage all those egos?
There's no egos to manage. Or pardon me, there are no egos to manage. Kevin Durant came to Golden State because he was willing to put his ego to the side. If he wasn't willing to put his ego to the side, he would never have came there in the first place. And Steph Curry is, one of those rare individuals who's unbelievably talented, but is ready to defer when he needs to.
Shaq and Kobe, how do you manage that in their prime?
They couldn't be managed in their prime. That's why they had to separate. That's why Phil Jackson was so frustrated by Kobe, he left the team and wrote a book about him. Wrote a book about him. Wrote a book, and within the book, he was getting at Kobe.
If it was easy, everybody would win because everybody has great players.
No, everybody doesn't have great players, Shannon.
For him to just, it's easy, he can just stand there. No, you can't. No, you can't.
If you coach a team well enough, you can get to the point where you pretty much can just stand there. I don't think that you have to coach 100% of the season if you're doing your job. If you prepare well enough early on, the team should run on automatic. If you're blessed enough to have the type of men and players that Steve Kerr has. And let's understand something. Of the 4 superstars that they have, well, I shouldn't say 4 superstars, the 2 superstars and the 2 stars, 2 out of the 4 players come from a family background with strong fathers. The other 2 don't have father figures in their life, and those are the 2 that are the most mentally fragile, that being Draymond and KD. Steph and Klay, fortunately, are more even keel. Fortunately for Steve Kerr, that provides an appropriate balance for the team.
Steve Kerr has the hardest job because he got to keep Draymond from getting thrown out of a game every single night.
No, he doesn't, because he doesn't stop Draymond from doing anything. Draymond does what he wants.
He has to manage KD. He has to manage Steph. He has to manage Klay.
Yeah, that's a hard job. Oh man, you gotta manage those 3 guys, with each of them scoring 30 points every game.
And he has to do it, and he makes it look so effortless.
Because it doesn't take that much effort. He's blessed. Don't get me wrong. I don't agree with Lavar that a coach can just stand there. But when you're in a situation like Steve Kerr is, what makes him a great coach is that he has great players. He can get them to the point where they should be able to operate on automatic. That is LeVar Ball's point. I think that the point that LeVar really meant to make is that a great coach, when he has great talent, can pretty much have the team operate on automatic. That's why he brought up Pat Riley and Magic and Phil Jackson with the Bulls. That's what a great coach does. He just really wanted to levy a personal attack on Steve Kerr because Steve Kerr is protecting Luke Walton. And right now, LeVar is mad at Luke Walton for what LeVar feels like Luke Walton is doing to his son. That's all.
Coaching superstars is not as easy as it looks because they know that
It's much easier than coaching bums.
they're
Agreed.
superstars.
Yep.
And in basketball, it is a superstar-driven league. And those guys are catered to. And you must understand how to manage those egos. Because if you can't, you move on down the road.
Yeah, you mean like your boy Tyronn Lue? Unfortunately, having to coach your boy LeBron.
See, if you want to try to minimize what Steve Kerr is doing, if you want to minimize, Mark Jackson should be a head coach. and he did an unbelievable
He
job.
did.
But he didn't get him across the finish line. Tony,
Well, Mark Jackson he's not willing to overtly worship Pan. In other words, he's not willing to follow behind the NBA's super liberal agenda, starting from Adam Silver on down. That is one of the main reasons why they exalt Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich. Not only do they win, but also remember, as I've stated previously, both of them have connections to the CIA. Greg Popovich was in the process of becoming a CIA operative, and Steve Kerr's father was a member or was an affiliate of the CIA. They claim that he was teaching over there in the Middle East and he got killed. Steve Kerr's dad was associated with the CIA. So Steve Kerr is a proxy, and it makes sense because the NBA has gone to great lengths to make sure that Steve Kerr has stayed visible since his playing career, whether it was him operating the Phoenix Suns or being involved with NBA TV or broadcasting or what have you.
Tony Dungy did an unbelievable job before John Gruden, but he didn't get him across the finish line. So now we're just going to give everybody all the credit that came before that didn't get the job done. This is so ridiculous. This is so utterly ridiculous, and I don't get, coaching. Normally, coaches don't offer critiques of other coaches. So clearly lets me know he's not a coach.
Well, the number one coach that he is a coach of his sons. He's a dad, Shannon. And unlike you, he hasn't made a bunch of excuses as to why he wasn't around to raise his sons. You stated that you had to give your all to football. That's all well and good. But being that you gave most of your young life to football and neglected your children, you really don't have much of a leg to stand on in criticizing LeVar Ball as a father, calling him the Milli Vanilli of dads, and claiming that if it wasn't for Lonzo, that he'd be obsolete. No, he wouldn't be obsolete. He'd be doing what he's always been doing, running his own business and providing for his family. One could say that if it were not for football, what would you be doing? So I think that that's a very slippery slope when you start talking about where LeVar Ball would be without his son. That's really not relevant. It's really not an intelligent argument to make. In regards to LeVar Ball criticizing Steve Kerr, as I've already stated, it clearly is an attempt to attack Luke Wall via proxy, and also to attack Mr. Steve Kerr for running his mouth and trying to act as if he should be speaking on subjects that he really should not be speaking about. He needs to be concerned with his team.
He's just a pretend. So I guess if I sign a 5-day contract with the Yankees in spring training, I guess I'm a MLBer. Because that's what he is. All he is, a Fugazi coach.
Yeah, that's true. I would agree.
It's ridiculous.
Well, he's a Suns coach because the way he coaches his sons is just shoot.
Yeah.
Just shoot it. Just run and shoot, right?
How is that going to work on a real team?
Well, his son LaMelo has shown that he also can pass. So once he does get to the NBA, which I'm sure he will, he's going to adapt to whatever the coach asks him. I don't see how one can state that all that LeVar Ball does is teach his sons to shoot, when his oldest son, Lonzo, all he does is pass. So which one is it? Does LeVar Ball just teach his sons to shoot, or he can't teach his sons to shoot? Which one is it?
Real team. So we hadn't heard from LeVar in what seems like 2 weeks, something like that. That's way too. That's like 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. And now every show in America is going to be talking about these comments. So congratulations, you did it again, LeVar. At what expense? Maybe at Lonzo's expense. We'll see. Because I think, in the end, these shots weren't fired at Steve Kerr as much as you point out. They were actually indirectly fired at Luke Walton, who...
Absolutely. It's very obvious. It's obvious. That's why he went out of his way to mention Luke Walton coaching the Golden State Warriors. He basically was calling both Steve Kerr and Luke Walton Milli Vanilli. That's why he used the term Milli Vanilli, because Milli Vanilli was a two-member group.
Who did stand in, obviously, for Steve Kerr, and things went pretty well in Golden State.
Oh, he mentioned that. He mentioned, Luke Walton just still in 120-something games.
I am still convinced LeVar declared war on Luke because Luke dared to declare war, in LeVar's eyes, on his son Lonzo early this season when he sat him for 3 fourth quarters.
Absolutely agree. And LeVar stated that from early. Why would you sit Lonzo for 3 fourth quarters when he's the second pick in the draft, he has to learn how to play fourth quarters.
That does not sit well. Probably didn't sit well with Lonzo, but definitely not with Dad. So Dad is protecting son, and then yet in this barrage of quotes, he did try to point out that Lonzo doesn't speak for me. I speak for Lavar. And he said Lonzo could come home. He said this will never happen. I'm paraphrasing the quotes, but that Lonzo would never come home and say, "Don't speak for me. Shut up." You know, Lavar is what he's saying. So I'm going to say whatever I want. And nobody told me, meaning Lonzo didn't tell him, that Luke had lost the team.
And just touching on what Skip just stated, that's how you know that when the media was trying to push for Lonzo to tell his dad to be quiet, what they were truly trying to do was to sow the seeds of dissension in the Ball family. It shows you the society that we live in, where grown men like Chris Broussard and Stephen A. Smith and Chris Carter will get on TV, supposedly, quote-unquote, representing for strong black men, and tell Lonzo Ball that he has to tell his dad to shut up. Yeah, okay. We all know that that was not going to happen, nor should Lonzo have approached his dad to tell him to shut up. Maybe he could have came to his dad on the side and said, "Dad, look, you have to be cognizant of the fact that certain statements that you make, they're going to try to attribute to me. So please consider that." That's all. But you can't tell a grown man what not to say, particularly a grown man who's the reason why you are where you are.
He said, "I saw it with my own two eyes." No high fives when they're coming out of games. Whatever the case is, war has been declared. So he was taking the Milli Vanilli shot at Luke Walton at Golden State, and then now he's the Laker coach, and Lavar doesn't like it and thinks he needs to be replaced because he doesn't know how to handle Lonzo.
Eventually, I believe that Luke Walton will be replaced, but the Laker brass are going to try to hold on to him as long as possible because they don't want to make it look like LaVar Ball is correct or like he's calling the shots, but eventually he is going to have to be replaced because they have too much young talent for them to be 11 games, 12 games under 500. Doesn't make sense. They should be fighting for the 8th seed.
And I'm going to just throw this out. I have no idea. I have no reporting on this at all. It just seems a little strange that all of a sudden Lonzo dropped out of sight with a quote-unquote sprained MCL on his knee. And it's been 7 games now, no Lonzo, and it just feels wrong to me. It almost feels like some protest is going on. Maybe he is hurt, I don't know, but they're down on Luke. And they're trying to make a case that they don't want to play for Luke. So,
well, I don't agree with that angle, Skip, because at the end of the day, a player just can't sit down. He has to get MRIs and X-rays that are going to qualify his reasoning behind why he cannot play. And the team is the one who decides that he can't play, not him. So no, they cannot engage in any protests stating that we're not going to play until you fire Luke. That doesn't make any sense.
That's what started all this. But now back to the big picture of what you say. Every time LaVar opens his mouth, the problem with it, the issue with commentators is there's always some truth in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
Do I think, as LaVar said, that the best coaching is less coaching? I do. You would agree with that?
Well, particularly when you know that you have the horses and that they're trained. After you have a thoroughbred, and you've already ascertained that the horse is properly trained, you don't have to keep whipping it across the back and across the neck. You just let it run.
It depends.
Well, it depends on what your situation is.
Right.
But in general, especially if you have a good team, you do need to stay somewhat out of the way.
Right.
But I'm going to remind everybody, going back to that 2015 finals, the first Cleveland Golden State finals, again, your man, LeBron James, is up 2-1 with Game 4 in his house. And he didn't have Kyrie. He didn't have Kevin Love going into the series. And yet, he had the advantage because he was playing phenomenal, dominating one-man basketball.
Well, I'd say this. He was dominant, but he was dominant from the standpoint that he was dominating the ball. He was not playing proficiently at a high level. He just was not. He was dominating the ball. He was shooting around 40% for the series. And the only reason why they were up 2-1 was because Golden State did not know up from down. They were so nervous the first 3 games. They didn't get their bearings until Game 4.
He was just carrying the whole show.
Right.
And I'm thinking, because remember, Golden State wasn't Golden State yet. They didn't have that supreme belief that we are a dynasty.
Right.
They weren't sure who they were. and Steph wasn't quite yet Steph, and Dellavedova was giving him some problems.
Yeah, he was extremely physical with him. And Curry has shown that he does have a weakness for guards who play him extremely physically. He tends to go into a shell when he encounters a defender who gets extremely physical with him. He's starting to kind of come out of that, particularly recently in the last year and a half or so. But he has shown that if you get extremely physical with him, that he will kind of back down.
For the first 3 games, up 2-1. And what did Steve Kerr do for Game 4? He made the strategic change maybe in the history of the finals. It was a big deal.
Well, he stumbled upon it in Game 3 when they were getting blown out. He just threw Andre Iguodala in the game, and they cut it down. They ended up winning. The Cavs ended up winning, but Steve Kerr I'm on to something here.
Okay, but this is a coaching decision.
Well, let me correct the both of them. First off, Shannon is correct. The Golden State Warriors were getting blown out throughout Game 3. Steph was getting manhandled by Dellavedova again, and what happened is, in the latter part of the third quarter, going into the fourth, Steph started to make shots. He started to get his mojo back. And Steve Kerr brought in Andre Iguodala, and they went small. And they started to see that they could run Cleveland. And Steve Kerr, and all due credit to him, he admitted that it was not his idea to bring Andre Iguodala in. A member of his assistant coaching staff told him, let's try to bring in Andre. So you can't give the credit to Steve Kerr for coming up with that one. They're fishing for some sign of great coaching acumen from Steve Kerr so that they can counteract what LeVar Ball stated. But no, that one does not apply.
And it's a gutsy one. I'm going to start Andre Iguodala over Bogut.
Yes.
We aren't going to go big. We're going small.
Right.
Yes, and let me also say what happened in the 2015 finals. And one of the main things that separates the 2015 finals from the 2016 finals, if you guys remember, Adam Silver changed the final schedule in 2016 because they were trying to get LeBron the championship in 2015. LeBron was supposed to win the championship in Cleveland in 2015, but Golden State came out of nowhere. And what they realized was it was because of the final schedule in 2015. They had a 2-game break, I believe, in between games 2 and 3. And that gave LeBron the time that he needed to recuperate for game 3. And they came out and they won game 3. There was only a 1-day break between games 3 and 4. And when they came out for game 4, LeBron James was gassed. And Skip always talks about how LeBron was tired and he's supposed to be in great shape. Game 4, he didn't show up. He didn't show up because it was a 1-game difference between, or 1-day break between game 3 and game 4. What Adam Silver did in 2016, because he realized it, he made the breaks between every game in the finals, starting in 2016, a 2-day break. And that's why Cleveland was able to come back from down 3-1, because they knew that the schedule favored them and the momentum favored them, because LeBron would not be tired in any game because they would get 2 days off in between every game. So Golden State, to their credit, they went out there and they got Kevin Durant because they realized they needed somebody who could nullify LeBron James.
Right. Get Bogut out of there. We don't care if they have Mozgov or not.
Correct.
We'll figure it out. And I'm going to put Iggy on LeBron.
Right.
And he bothered in that game because that was the first bad game LeBron had. He shot 7 for 22. He shot 5 of 10 from the free throw line.
That was not the first bad game that LeBron had. LeBron had not really played that proficiently in any game. It was just that he was dominating the basketball. And he was tired in game 4.
Line. It was like 1 of 4 from 3, so he was just smothering it. He's all over him.
Right.
And all of a sudden, LeBron's a minus 15 in that game. And when I thought, wow, they got a game in the Kings' house, they might just close the deal tonight effectively. Because if they go up 3-1, I think they're going to win the series, right?
It'd have been hard for them.
Ooh, wow.
And the thing is, and that's what makes.
And by the way, the punchline to that is, who was the MVP of the finals?
Iguodala.
Iguodala. Wow. Well, you got to give some credit to Steve Kerr for that.
Think about it.
Well, you have to give some credit to his assistant coaching staff. You give credit to Steve Kerr for listening. That's truly what a great leader does. He listens to proper advisement.
By the Skip, if you Pat Riley, you got Magic and Kareem. Magic is Finals MVP. Kareem is a 6-time MVP. But you got to blend that together. And then you got the number 1 overall draft pick and James Worthy coming in. And so now we got to keep everybody happy. You got to keep the big 3 happy in the Celtics.
Yep.
Basically right around the same age. You got Shaq and Kobe. It's not easy, especially in basketball, Skip, because it's a superstar, a mega superstar-driven league, and they cater to those guys. So how do I give KD what he wants without ticking off Clay, Steph, and Draymond?
Yeah, but all that is not relevant in this situation. Shannon is trying hard to make Steve Kerr out to be some type of a team psychiatrist, something along the lines of a Phil Jackson. He's never had to deal with the issues that Phil Jackson had to deal with in Chicago or in LA. He's trying to give Steve Kerr a little bit too much credit. And the credit that Steve Kerr deserves is more than enough, that being that he brought a large component of the Phoenix Suns offense to Golden State, understanding that they had the roster to run that offense. They kept the Mark Jackson defense, and that's what made them the championship team that they are. But like I said, this is really all about Shannon being still upset with Lavar over Lavar saying that he's not going to talk to Shannon and Chris Carter and Nick Wright anymore, because those guys are basically just getting on TV and acting like hoes. And then they're the type of guys to see Lavar off camera and say, I love what you're doing with your kids. But, when I get on camera, I got to say certain things. Yeah, whatever, man. Phony.
I got it. But back to your point quickly about Doug Collins. Doug's a friend of mine. I know him very well. Yeah. I know his coaching style. He coaches with his hands around his team's throat.
Absolutely.
And that didn't work for the Jordan team.
Right.
You couldn't break through because he was over-coaching that team. To LeVar's point, I'm trying to be balanced about this, because if you watch Doug coach, like when he went to Detroit, he would sweat completely through his suit.
Absolutely. For people who don't know, this is the reason why Doug Collins can't stick anywhere. And you always have these people, Doug Collins could have won a championship with the Bulls. No, he could not have. Phil Jackson was exactly what that team needed. He was a calming force, who also was an expert in what he wanted them to do. And that's what you need in a coach. You need a coach who's an expert in what he's trying to implement, so that the team knows that when the exploits of a great player are not working, they can revert back to the system.
Suit coat. He'd have to take it off because it was just drenched with sweat. Well, that's how he coaches furiously, like he's just trying with all his might to get it to work.
Right.
Well, sometimes you do have to kind of let it drift a little bit, let them find their roles. But if you're coaching superstars, to your point, they're all going to want to play 40 minutes, right? You got to rest them occasionally. You got to.
Right, but that is not the issue with Golden State. So they're trying to make LeVar Ball look like he's so unfair and so incorrect in his assessment of Steve Kerr. And they're using examples of other quote-unquote super teams and the egos that they had to deal with. Once again, what makes Golden State so special and so unique is that their strongest personality is actually their role player. That's Draymond Green, their do-everything guy. Their more talented offensive players are actually, it's actually very easy for them to be submissive. And that's what makes this team so different.
You got to make them save them from themselves.
Michael's doing what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Everybody, Doug probably said, Mike, you got to lay off some of the golf. Feel like, okay, go play golf.
Yeah,
go smoke a cigar. Yeah. You have to understand the balance of what you have. You can't coach everybody the same way. It looks easy. Oh, I can coach. No, you couldn't. It's just like I hear people, man, I can do what he doing. No, you can't.
Well, that was Phil Jackson's whole philosophy, that each player is different and you have to handle them
and he
differently.
He juggled it beautifully.
You treat him.
Right, well, he was once again, all top coaches are MK handlers or MK handler trained. Okay? If you were to research enough about most of the top coaches, I shouldn't say all top coaches, but if you were to research enough about most of your top coaches in all three sports, all three major team sports, most of them have a military background in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Mike Krzyzewski, Bobby Knight, Greg Popovich, so on and so forth. Most of them have an angle on mind control, or at the very least, psychological manipulation. Because you do have to be I won't say an expert, but you do have to have some form of expertise, if not an outright expert, in forms of psychological manipulation. Because you have to get players excited to play every night, especially in big moments. You have to be able to calm them in tense situations.
Treat them all fair, but you don't treat them all the same.
No, and yet, one last point in LeVar's favor. I'm happy he brought up Mark Jackson because he doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah.
He laid the foundation,
Yes.
especially on the defensive end.
Yes.
He taught those kids a toughness that they were going to need to carry
Yes.
over defensively under Steve Kerr.
And he should have gotten another opportunity to
I
coach.
wish he would. I wish he still would.
Well, clearly he's not going to get another opportunity because he's not plugged in per se. Hopefully, brothers get an understanding as to why certain coaches don't get another opportunity. There's a lot to being in that fraternity known as the NBA and the NBA coaches, more than just your ability to coach. They get on TV and they smile and say, yeah, you know, Mark is a great coach. It's unfortunate. And behind the scenes, they say other things. No, Mark is not against pansexual. Mark is not for pansexuality like he's supposed to be. Mark is not bowing down before our God like he's supposed to. You'd be surprised, man. You'd be shocked. You should read the book, Transformation of America. It tells you about baseball managers like Sparky Anderson of the Detroit Tigers, Tommy Lasorda of the LA Dodgers. These men were pedophiles. These men were MK handlers. Nolan Ryan knew about the MK sex kittens. You'd be shocked. But anyway, peace.